There's my posse. That's my entourage right there. They just came rolling in. How you guys doing? You good? Cool. I really struggle with what I was going to talk about today because I don't take these opportunities lightly. To be able to stand up in front of people and talk and share how you feel about things is a privilege and an honor, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate you listening. So I thought long and hard about it, and I usually, when I stand in front of folks, I end up in a Q&A. And so I started to think about, well, what would be the questions that I would ask myself? And I came up with a litany of questions. And then I realized somewhere along the way that somebody once told me when I was in school that there's no such thing as a dumb question. Did you guys ever hear that? That's okay, they said it down under as well. And so somebody said there's no such thing as a dumb question. And I think that that's complete and utter bullshit. I think there is absolutely such thing as a dumb question. I understand why they said it, because they wanted to inspire curiosity in us as kids and encourage us to learn. Because at the foundation of anything you ever learn, it starts with a question. But there is a dumb question, and a dumb question is any question that you could simply find the answer if you applied a little bit of personal effort. And I think now that the internet exists, we can no longer say there's no such thing as a dumb question. In fact, most questions are dumb questions. Like, it just gets to the point where you go, buddy, go look it up. And I really wish when I asked that question, if it was something that I could easily look up, that person would have said to me, go look it up, you can find it. And granted, back then I had to use the Dewey Decimal System and pound through a library of books that didn't make any sense why they got put where they were put. But they should have said, go look it up. And so I was pondering this, and I recalled, last week I was walking with Mila Kunis, who's my fiance. I get to have sex with her. It's a... So we're walking, and I had baby Wyatt. We're on a hike, and I had baby Wyatt strapped to me. She's beautiful. I'm telling you, this kid is I'm freaking out. It's new, but it never gets old. So I'm hiking along with baby Wyatt, and Mila has this movie coming out that may have come out down here called Jupiter Ascending. And it's all about this intergalactic war for the most valuable resource in the universe, which is time. And Mila's character is the queen of humanity. I have sex with the queen of humanity. It's pretty funny. Anyway, so we're walking along, and she had just got done doing this giant press junket where you sit in a room for countless hours with journalists, and they ask you questions about the movie and the directors and these things. And she'd done 2 days of this and probably talked to 50 journalists. And we're walking, doing our morning hike, and I say, all right, let me guess. I want to guess the questions that you got asked 100 times, because usually it's always the same questions. And so my first question was, in the movie, the most valuable resource is time, and they actually mine human beings and extract the innards of human beings to create this resource of time. I said, in your universe, what is the most valuable resource? And her answer was time as well, that time was the most valuable resource, and I would say that's probably my answer too. But she said, nobody asked me that question. And I was kind of shocked. I'm like, how did they not ask you that question? That's what the whole movie's about. And nobody asked you that question. And I said, well, wait, you played the queen of humanity in the movie. I said, if you were the queen of humanity and you could change one thing about the world, what would be that one thing that you would change? She said, nobody asked me that question. I said, how could they not ask you that question? And not that these are brilliant questions, or not that these are beyond the moon questions, but they're thoughtful questions about her movie. It's okay, baby. It's okay, baby. I'm sorry, that's like a flash. I want to go home. Let the baby cry. I'm used to it. It's fine. I can go this whole thing. So anyway, I couldn't believe that she hadn't been asked these questions. And then I was like, well, what questions did they ask you? What dress are you wearing? And she said, yes, they asked that. And I thought, really? Really? You had an opportunity to sit with, granted, I prize her as the most valuable person in the world to me, but you had a chance to sit with Mila Kunis, and that's what you asked her? What dress are you wearing? And so then I started to think to myself, well, there are dumb questions. There are questions that waste your time and my time and everybody else's time. I started thinking, well, what is a great question? What constitutes an exceptional question? And I was like thinking about it and grinding on it and thinking about it. And what I realized is that a great question is a question that's armed with knowledge, that's armed with care and thought, and that pierces into the gray matter of the world and the universe that we live in and looks for problems and inconsistency and broken things. Great questions cause us to sit for days and ponder a solution. Great questions expose problems, and problems are the seeds to solutions. Great questions expose roadblocks, which are an entrepreneur's opportunity. A great question sometimes will arrive at a no, which is the playground for a rebel spirit. And I have the great opportunity in my life to work with a lot of unbelievable entrepreneurs that are solving extraordinary problems. And the one thing that they all have in common is they all ask extraordinary questions. And they build their businesses from these questions. They build technology from great questions, questions that parse apart existing businesses. They tear them down. They tear down conventions that we just assume are true. And they expose this magical thing that exists behind every great business. Time. That most magical resource in the world. They find ways to save time. I think time exists on two vectors. It exists on one vector, which is longevity. It's a vector that goes on and on and on, and we're always in our lives seeking longer lives, better lives. It exists on another vector, which is quality. We want better lives, lives that are more filled with wonder and enjoyment and entertainment. Those are the two vectors of time, and those are the two vectors that every single business, every single great business exposes, and they expose it through great questions. So, I think that the most wonderful thing in the world, the most wonderful luxury in the world, is being able to take your time with the things that you want to take your time with. It's an amazing thing to be able to write a long-form handwritten letter and send it to someone. It actually means more because it's got time involved in it. It's an amazing thing to be able to take a stroll through the park because you get to take your time and breathe and actually appreciate the things in this world that are wonderful. So, back to questions. What is the most magnificent question? Well, I have a question that I like to ask to people that I admire in the world. And when I run into someone in the world that I admire, and I get to run into these people quite frequently, I like to ask this one question, and that is, what's the best advice that you've ever received to get you to where you are? And I get amazing answers. And I ask this question in a very particular way. I don't ask it when I'm in crisis. I don't ask it when I need advice. I ask it proactively because I sometimes think that when you ask people that question of what is the best advice, when you need advice, you'll paint their answer into your question. And if you ask them while you're in crisis and you expose your crisis to them, they'll give you an answer that actually that is completely colored by their own experience and their own problem, which isn't always the best thing to do. The best thing to do is build up this reservoir, this library of extraordinary advice that you can access anytime you're in crisis. And that's what I do. When I come up against a problem or an obstacle or a roadblock, I then go back to my index of advice that I've received from extraordinary people. And I look at it, and usually the answer's already in there. So I thought last night, as I was not taking this opportunity for granted, I decided to reach out to some folks that I thought you guys might know. and asked them what the best piece of advice they've ever received was so that I could share it today. So I reached out to my fiance, Mila. I mean, that was an easy one, right? And she said, don't let your ego get in the way of asking for help. To me, that is great advice. And to me, I can use that advice all the time. I reached out to Taylor Swift. I figured, she's like the top of the charts right now. I wonder if she would actually even answer my email. She did, which is amazing for the person who's maybe the most busy person on the planet right now. She answered this email because she thought it was important that I share something with you. And she said, keep your hopes high and your expectations low. You're not entitled to anything, but there's nothing that you can't earn. I love that one. You're not entitled to anything, but there's nothing that you can't earn. And most importantly, enthusiasm can protect you from absolutely anything. Ooh, that's good. That, when I watch her do interviews, now I understand a little bit more about her. Because she's always has that that bubble going. And I'm like, you're protecting yourself. I dig it. I like it. So I reached out to Bradley Cooper. He's got one of the #1 movies in America. This American Sniper movie, which I think is fantastic. And he said, hey, pal, thanks for asking. Often I thought about this old cartoon commercial when I was a kid that sent the message to be yourself and just how vital that is to growth. And when I finally realized that notion some 30 years after watching those commercials in between Saturday cartoons, I found a true difference in my daily life. Knowing that we all have ourselves, and all we have is ourselves, our uniqueness. That is what we can use to cultivate in order to create or do whatever it is that we want to do in this life. Just be yourself. Simple advice, but it's really good advice, and I can imagine that advice coming handy in a moment of crisis. So I reached out to Chris Rock, and he I love his. Advice, that's a hard one. How about 1? People that can't listen can't lead. 2, one of the keys to success is the ability to listen to people that you know that you are smarter than. And I read that and I was like, oh man, oh no, the whole thesis of my entire thing, which is there are no dumb questions, but there are dumb questions. Maybe I just undermined myself with that piece of advice. And I do think that that's important. I do think that it's important to listen to people that you know that you're smarter than, because you may not be. And then he signed it the CEO of nothing, which I thought was pretty good. And then I reached out to Eric Schmidt, who's a friend of mine, and he said, always return phone calls. Take the time. If you put good energy out, it comes back. Whenever possible, say yes. Life is just who you travel with. I thought that was pretty killer. So, and this list goes on and on and on. And what I found is most successful people always have more than one piece of advice. So that's my question. That's the question that I like to ask, and that's the question that leads me to solutions and leads me to roadblocks sometimes and leads me to internal quandary, which leads me to be a better person, I think. So then I go to what is my advice to other people? What is the question that for me is enduring? And the advice that I would give, if I asked myself my own question, I would say the number one piece of advice I've ever received was that there's no substitution for hard work. I found a quote from Edison that said, opportunity wears overalls and looks a lot like hard work. I shortened it, took out the overalls thing, and then told a bunch of teenagers about it, and it went viral on the internet. But I think opportunity does look a lot like hard work. I've never met a successful person that doesn't work hard. I think it's just a constitution, and I think that you have to have that grit when you come against obstacles to work through them. The second thing, being smart is incredibly sexy. I think that being smart is one of the sexiest things in the world. I think that when you're young and you're going to school and you're a kid and you're in school and you're in class, dumb kids like to make fun of you because you're smart, and they like to pull you down because they don't want you to excel, because when you excel, they feel like less. And so they try to beat you down about being smart. And I think that people get pinned underneath that, and then they don't aspire to be as great as they could possibly be and as smart as they could possibly be. And I think I'm tired of it, because I love smart people and I think that they're sexy. Generosity has to be at the core of anything and everything we do. Some of the best advice I ever received is somebody once told me that the difference between good and bad is very simple. Is it good for you? Is it good for me? And is it good for the greater good? If it doesn't fall into those three categories, it is bad. Is it good for you? Is it good for me? And is it good for the greater good? And if our actions are oriented by actions of generosity that are good for me and good for you and good for the greater good, we'll always be moving the boat forward, the boat that we're all in. I think generosity is paramount. Lastly, it's a piece of advice that I learned when I was studying to play Steve Jobs in the movie. And he said that when you look around the world, most people get trapped in this world and they assume that we're here to live in it. But that when you realize that everything around you was built by people that are no smarter than you are, that's when you'll really step into your life. And you'll decide for yourself that you can build things that other people can use. And you can actually build this existence around you, this life that we live in. And somebody once said, if you want to see the future, if you want to know what the future looks like, build it. And I agree with that. Absolute. So, what's the question I most often get asked? The good question I most often get asked. I mean, I do get asked like some questions that I'm like, what's Brad Pitt like? He's awesome. He's amazing. I once saw this guy. I'm not kidding. I walked into a room, and it looked like he had lights that were just built for him. It was a regular room, but it was like his hair was like it was like a wind machine. There was no wind. It was just Brad Pitt being sexy and brilliant. Hate that guy. Love him. Hate him. But the best question that I commonly get asked is, I invest in a lot of technologies. I invested in Airbnb and Uber and Spotify and SoundCloud and a bunch of companies that are sort of leading the way in commercial software. The question I get asked all the time is, what's next? What's on the horizon of technology? And I never really answer the question that well, because I think like the thing that I always think is next is I wish I would have thought of that. Like when you get an idea and you get confronted with it and somebody says something, they go, oh, well, this is what we're building. And you go, oh, God, why didn't I think of that? This guy's going to change the world with that. And so I wish I would have thought of that is like a big like compass for me with what's next. But if I looked at the tech sector as a whole and I sort of break it down, I think there are specific opportunities for entrepreneurs that are out there today that should be pursued, because they're things that are actually going to leapfrog the existing technology. A lot of people build to where the puck was instead of building to where the puck is going, and I think knowing where the puck is going is really important. So I'll break it down as quick as I can. I think municipalities and governments are ripe for disruption. I think they sit on tons and tons and tons of data and tons and tons and tons of waste, and they take our tax money and waste the shit out of it and then hand us back a product that is subpar, that's extraordinarily subpar. And I think technology can walk into those municipalities, take that data, and actually build smart solutions out of it. I think we can think about things like traffic and environment and how much energy our city is using and how much waste there is. And I think we as entrepreneurs can step into these municipalities, our municipalities, that we pay taxes for, and make them better with our technology. There's huge opportunity there. Next up, VR and AR. This virtual reality stuff and augmented reality stuff is unbelievable. If you haven't seen it, if you haven't experienced the newest stuff yet, I strongly urge you to do so. It's mind-blowing. You know, these screens that we manipulate, they started out as like movie theaters that we had no remote control over, and then they became televisions that we had to walk up to and change the station, then we could run back and sit down. I was alive when that happened. Then, you know, it got closer and it became a computer screen, and we manipulated it with a keyboard and a mouse, and now it's in our hand and it's here and it's about to be right here. And when it gets right here, it gets really, really cool, because this world can become whatever we want it to be. In a world of AR and VR, you can walk down the street and have monsters jump around corners. I can leave virtual digital notes for my wife on the refrigerator. I can leave notes for my child. I can leave a video here for you. The entire world becomes the playground of our technology, and we can place things in space and then recall them whenever we want. We can be as powerful as Bill Clinton, who has an earman who walks around with him and tells you who everybody is and one thing about them, so you actually know who they are and you know who you're conversing with, and your memory recall doesn't have to spend time on that. We can have superpowers. You know, why do we settle for 2020 vision? It's kind of silly, because it's not the best vision. Vision can get a lot better than that, and we can improve it. We can have vision. I can see the guy in the back row, and I can see what your reaction is to what I'm saying if I had better vision. And once the screen is here, we can have that. Sound. I should be able to hear you across the room. I should be able to hear you down the hall. I should be able to click something and hear you without having to put anything up to my head. I think there's huge opportunities about our input sensories. And I think we're about to change our output sensory. You know, it started with the mouse, which was this cool tool that got stolen from Xerox, and then Apple took it, and then other people took it. And then all of a sudden, you know, we went, oh, wait, this is the best manipulator that we have is our finger, and we're going to do it. And so we've been working on these platforms ever since, trying to make them more optimized for finger manipulation. But at a certain point, we should kind of go, wait a second, why did they use a pen in the first place? Did you not want to stick your finger in an ink quill and have ink on your finger all day? No, because it's just not that agile. It's not as agile as we could be. And if we were superheroes, we would have more agile pointers than this. And so I think there will be a more agile pointer, and it might be your voice, or it might even be your thoughts. There's technology that exists today that if you focus hard enough, you can flip a switch. These could be the input sensories of the future. That's exciting. ID. You know, there are all of these wearables that we have that are starting to come out. And they're getting smarter and smarter and smarter. But once they really know that it's me, permissive access to the entire world opens up. These things are going to read our gait. Every human being has a different gait, it turns out. And we have different heartbeats. And our heartbeat, as it's oriented to our gait, is different. And our sweat is different. And once this sensor on my wrist knows that it's me, I can have permissive access to anything. I could have permissive access to my bank account, to rooms, to buildings. I could have permissive access to information. If somebody wanted to leave information for me in a certain place with my permissive access, I could then recall that information. That's pretty cool. How many people here have a phone in their pocket? How many people have a screen? Like virtually every single person in this room. Why do we need 500 screens in a room? What if my permissive access that knew it was me, knew all of my preferences, knew what I wanted, knew the UI and the OS that I wanted to have on this screen, and I could just have it here? Because it would say, hey, Ashton, is that you? And I'd say, absolutely, it's me, check. Okay, that's me. There's my screen. And I'm going to manipulate it with my pointer that's better than my finger, because sometimes touching it isn't always the best way. And so then this liquid product of screens that the price point keeps driving down, you see these tablets that are $100 that are junk. Well, actually, that tablet that's $100 that's junk, we can start to throw our OS onto it, and it doesn't have to be that intelligent because my permissive access is. So I think that that's in the future. I think that's really exciting. There's biotech, which I'm running out of time, so I'll go really short on that. I saw this thing the other day where this guy had used the phosphorescence of jellyfish and implemented it into plants. Plants are easier than people because you have to deal with all these regulations in order to get things approved. And so he made this phosphorescent plant. And he's speculating that he could build phosphorescent trees for our streets instead of street lamps. You just have glow-in-the-dark trees. It's kind of great until you're the one that has the tree planted outside your window and you're like, cut down the street lamp tree. But I still think it's brilliant. I think there's a ton to be discovered there. And there's a ripe opportunity. And the last thing, I think, is robots. I think these robots are at the infancy. I think that we're on page 1 of a 1,000-chapter book. We're just starting to realize the potential. There's a robot that some friends of mine are working on that is learning how to learn. Oh. Once it knows how to learn, it could get smart real fast because we could just feed it the internet. And now it could make correlations between things that we could never fathom making correlations. Give me a robot that can ask a great question, and I'll show you the future. So keep your questions coming, make them smart, and imagine the impossible. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Awesome.